Now, when we examine the history, the photo evidence, and the satire at the time when vaccination was becoming a fad again, harming and killing many people because they were being infected literally, we can actually see how ridiculous the notion of vaccination is when we understand the origins of it. Here we see the origin of the vaccine virus, or cowpox, where the cow is actually cut in several places in order to produce the pus like material, which would be scraped out or harvested from the cow, scraped off of the cow pustule by this sharp instrument, not a needle, more like a knife. And then the so called doctor would cut the arm of the child, using the same blade on each child, and then literally poke that child with the infected instrument that the cowpus was harvested from. This, my friends, is the origin of vaccination. As we travel through history, we see this strange custom coming to life. Here again, the cow pus being harvested, the doctor scraping the pus directly from the cow, while across the room another doctor's using that same instrument with the pus to poke it into the body. When we look at the political art and satire at the time, we get a clearer picture of those who at the time would today be called anti-vaccination. In reality, they just don't want to get poked with cowpus, or cowpox. Here, an ad for Lancaster County vaccine farms. Yes, farms. They were farming these pustules, these pox, scraping the pus, and creating mass vaccinations. Here, it states that our farms are the largest, cleanest, and completest in the world. Our vaccine source, America's only authenticated case of spontaneous cowpox. And there you have the clean rooms where vaccines were harvested from cows purposefully infected with cowpox. Now, it is necessary to understand that vaccination was required, it was mandated. Many people didn't have a choice. They were forcibly infected or inoculated. Remember, inoculated means to harm or to infect with a disease. That is what vaccination is. Remember, vaccination comes from the word vacca or cow, and that the vaccine disease is the cow disease. Knowing that, we can look at this satiric portrayal of the inoculation called the wonderful effects of new inoculation, new harm. Here we see the devilish assistant with the benefits of vaccination in his back pocket, holding the vaccine pock pus bucket, hot from the cow, and the doctor poking the woman with the pus. Meanwhile, in the background, those who have been vaccinated are literally growing little demon cows out of their orifices and out of their body parts. This is a reference to diseases and cancers that grew from the vaccination process, through the process of harm. In the background, we see the worship of the golden calf, which is also interesting, though we won't include that in this particular documentary. We find that many of the ancient gods were actually presented in the cow form, something you can research for yourself. And indeed, this portrays the vaccinators as worshippers of the cow, who wish to somehow integrate us with the cow. It's a very interesting history. And over here we even have the opening mixture bucket of pus mixed with something which creates a drug, quote unquote, a compound of two or more things, and it's being directly fed to this gentleman who is the patient or forced to take the inoculation. Here we see the vaccinated calf, where it states that calves must be happy and contented, and that the performance causes the animals no pain. Well, perhaps I could shave you, cut you a couple hundred times, let you bleed and get infected, and then scrape the pus from your wounds, and see how happy and unharmed you are. This is a picture of the smallpox vaccine unit, or the preparation room, from 1918 at Sanofi Pasteur in Canada, speaking about animal matter, in other words, pus, the making of pure bovine vaccine at the Kennott Laboratories and Farm at the turn of the century. And here another disturbing satire of the vaccinators being chased out of town, where it states mercenary and merciless spreaders of death and devastation are driven out of society. Notice they're being chased out with their vaccination devices, complete with pus and blood. Also notice the dead and cowpoxed children lying all around. Here, the satire obviously shows vaccinations as death in the form of a venomous snake. And in this portrayal of vaccination, here the demon cow pustules, which are labeled pestilence, Pandora's box, plague, leprosy, and fested ulcers, are portrayed, where again we see infants being dumped by the bucket loads into the cow's orifice by demons, the vaccination knife in the back of his pocket next to his cow tail, and here the image of those now vaccinated infants being excreted from the cow's anus and shoveled into a cart. Bring out your dead. These were the first attempts or anti-vaccination campaigns to teach the common people the dangers and ridiculous notion of vaccination. And of course, while we hear of the great accomplishments of vaccination in the past, the true statistics are shocking. The amount of death and devastation caused by vaccines, a subject covered in Lethal Injection Part 1, is the true story, the true history of this ridiculous practice. Not the least of those was the polio vaccine, from the book Dr. Mary's Monkey, where a handful of prominent doctors stepped in to throw the weight of their reputations on the side of the vaccine. Dr. Alton Oshner was a stockholder in one of the laboratories that produced the polio vaccine. He was so convinced that Salk's vaccine was safe that he decided to publicly inoculate his own grandchildren with the vaccine in front of the faculty of Tulane Medical School. Oshner's grandson died of polio within 48 hours, and his granddaughter was crippled with it. Now, unfortunately, polio is alive and well. Another subject covered in my previous documentary. Today, in America, it's been relabeled as chronic fatigue syndrome. It is now 30 years since I have been confining myself to the treatment of chronic diseases. During those 30 years, I have run against so many histories of little children who had never been sick a day until they were vaccinated, and who, in the several years that have followed, have never seen a well day since. I couldn't put my finger on the disease they have. They just weren't strong. Their resistance was gone. They were perfectly well before they were vaccinated. They have never been well since. This from Dr. William Howard Hay, a medical doctor.